Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. In this one I'll present the new RDPresets airport add-on Naples in Italy, and I really love the airport, not just here in the flight sim but also in the real world. Not only does the airport have a beautiful surrounding, but also it has interesting approaches with lots of challenges, and those I will explain to you in detail here in this video, so stay tuned.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 5.
So when I found out that RDPresets are making a airport add-on Naples here in Microsoft Flight Sim, I was really excited about it. And I have to say they did a superb job. The airport here in the Flight Sim looks very nice indeed. And one of the most exciting aspects, that runway slope, which is going either 0.7% up or 0.7% down, depending on the runway direction, is also correctly simulated, which is absolutely brilliant. Before I go into the specifics regarding arrivals and approaches, just a little disclaimer that my explanations are for flight simulation use only. They do not represent any professional advice for real-world pilots out there. So let's have a look at the arrivals. You have standard arrivals, so conventional arrivals, and you also have the RNAV arrivals, which lead you to the initial approach fixes Oliva or Bento. As you can see here on this chart, there is high terrain to the north and to the east of the airport, and so the arrival route has very high initial approach altitudes. Runway 24 has several ILS approaches, ILS Zulu and Yankee for example, but also has an RMP Zulu approach. The differences from the ILS Zulu to the ILS Yankee approach runway 24 are, for one, the missed approach procedures, but also the final approach point or the final descent point, which in one case is out of 3,770 feet for the Yankee approach, and for the Zulu approach it is 2,200 feet. One speciality is the fact that all of these approaches have a higher than normal down slope of around 3.3 degrees. To be exact, the ILS approaches have 3.33 degrees and the RMP approach has 3.30 degrees. Here's a quick view from the northeast of the airport, flying towards that mountain ridge near Bento, and you can see that's the reason why you have to maintain that 7,000 feet there. Once you have passed the waypoint Bento, it's a step descent down to the next level, which is 5,200 feet until Romeo November 714. And once you've passed that waypoint, you'll step descent down to 4,000 feet at Uruk. Thereafter, it's either intercept onto the glide slope or another step descent down to 2,200 feet, but being aware of that 3,400 feet restriction, which is obstacle related until 9.5 dms from November Alpha Papa. And you can see here why that is. You have pretty high mountains still to the east of the airport, which you have to keep clear of. Once you have passed that final ridge, it's onto the glide slope, and again, due to the fact that it has a minus 3.33 degree downslope, it is advisable to be at least in config 2 here in the A320 to be able to maintain that higher descent rate. Now don't forget to have a look to the left hand side when you're in the approach. Look at that volcano, the Vesuve, and also towards the front there, the Gulf of Napoli. Another interesting fact is, as we're approaching the runway, you can see one of the effects of flying a steeper than normal profile combined with an upsloping runway, and you get the optical illusion of being high in the approach. And this illusion tends to be a factor for hard landings on runway 24, but also the opposite can happen, that by anticipation of that higher descent rate, pilots may actually flare too early, which then can lead to a long landing. The runway here in Naples isn't that short. It has 2,438 meters of available landing distance. However, landing a heavy 320 or 321 here on a hot summer's day and then flaring for too long can then leave you with some very hot breaks.
100 above.
And here you can see that we're on the glide slope, on the right PAPI slope, but experienced pilots will look at the picture and say,
Minimum
yeah, the aircraft seems to be high in the approach.
400. 300. 200.
So personally, I tend to take out a
100.
part of the descent rate a little bit earlier than normal, just to
50,
test how the aircraft
40,
reacts,
30, 20. Retard.
then continuously adding back pressure and trying to find the right point to touch down. Let's now have a look at the approaches towards runway 06. We can find the ILS Zulu, ILS Yankee, and the RP approach. And again, the difference between the Zulu and the Yankee ILS approach, as you can see, is the missed approach procedure. Also, very important to point out is that the inbound course is offset by 5 degrees to the runway track. And the reason for that, as always, is higher terrain in front of the runway. But even though the localizer or the RP track is offset by 5 degrees, you also have a steeper than normal glide slope or descent profile of 3.5 degrees. So as you can see, not only runway 24 has interesting approaches, also runway 06 does pose some challenges. But also these approaches are visually very, very, very appealing. Now here you have a very good overview of the offset to the runway and also the reasoning behind it, and that is the high terrain left of the runway track. So again, we are aware of the big offset to the runway and also that steeper than normal glide slope. A good cross-check of your instruments and the flight path is definitely required. Then as you come closer to the runway and you've cleared the terrain, you can start to get established on the center line. Continue on a steady descent. And here we have obviously the opposite optical illusion to runway 24. So here we actually have a downsloping runway, and that can mean that you have maybe the tendency to think that you're a bit low. So again, cross-check of your instruments and your visual indications.
Minimum 400. 300.
Another thing to point out here is the displaced threshold.
200.
And so the landing distance available in this direction is only 2,229 meters. So since we have a downsloping runway,
100.
we have to be careful not to brake too hard and then run into risk of floating
50,
the aircraft too far
40,
down the runway.
30, 20, retard. 5.
And there we have it. Lovely approach onto runway 06. Before we have a final look at the taxi procedures here in Naples, let me point out one interesting thing about the approach to runway 24. And that is, if you're on VATSIM, for example, flying towards Naples, you may ask the controller if you can approach via Teano, so the Teano 1 micro arrival, and then during the approach ask for a direct to the waypoint SCOP. And that way you can really shorten the approach tremendously. This is done in real life as well. And if you're lucky enough to get the short approach, you can save a lot of time and fuel. Be aware though that you're going to have to work on trying to get the aircraft down in time. So speed brakes and the use of early configuration definitely required in these cases. So let's have a look at the taxi procedures when landing on runway 24. All aircraft vacating either via Bravo Charlie, Bravo have to do a left turn onto Romeo in order to taxi into your gates. The chart shows you the taxi direction through these arrows, and so there shouldn't be any confusion on how to taxi. If you're lucky, ATC may give you a permission to actually vacate via Bravo Charlie and then taxi right onto Romeo. But yeah, again, that has to be cleared by ATC. And at the end of this video, I've got a real-world recording from my approach runway 24 and also a departure out of runway 24. And you'll see me taxi out to the right there with special permission. Before I forget, I need to let you know how to depart out of Napoli, especially runway 24. And that is due to the terrain situation and also noise abatement situation. It is very important that you follow that instruction where it says at departure end of runway, which is 0.5 nautical miles, November Papa Charlie DME, on track 220 degrees, and then at 1200, but not further than 2 miles from November Papa Charlie, turn left again, max 180 knots, on a 178 degrees heading, and then intercept Sorrento 340 radio inbound to Gemma. Now, the FMS guidance may be a little late to initiate that turn, and so it does require a maybe conventional kind of navigation from the pilot. So we come to the end of the video, but before we go, I have 2 recordings from my real-world approaches and departures out of Naples. And yes, the approach is a shorter approach via SCOP, in case you are wondering. And again, Naples is a fantastic airport to fly in and out of, so I do recommend this scenery from RDPresets. In general, if you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also hit that bell button so that you get a notification when another video goes live. A huge shout out to all my financial supporters, so that's subscribe on Twitch or become members on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next video or on the next live stream. Until then, as always, happy landings.
One thousand. 400, 300, 200, 100, 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, retard, 5.
Sense.